halftime show's playing, and Jon starts to dance. Those cheerleaders' moves, they put him in a trance. He dreams of a touchdown, a victory so near, but he's seen this before, brings back last year.
This is the One Star Cowboys Podcast Weekly Roundup episode. This is that typical end of the week, 10-minute or so show that kind of wraps things up, gets to some things that maybe we didn't get to in some of our previous episodes, and most importantly, gives you some updates at the end of the week about injuries and other things like that going into the game. So starting off with the injuries, Tyler Guyton, 1-0. He missed last week's game with the shoulder injury. He's been full in practice this week. I think he goes back to that starting spot at left tackle, but it is of note because Austin Richards did play well in place of Guyton last week. Chuma Doga, who has been out with that toe injury since training camp, he's returned to practice and he's been limited, so it looks like he's going to get a chance to potentially play, if not this week, the following week. I know it's kind of coming at a time when it's not really great things going on for the Cowboys. I'm sure they would have appreciated this depth a little bit earlier in the year, but it kind of is what it is. Jordan Lewis has had a neck issue that has kept him out of practice this week, so that's certainly a position of note there. And then sticking with cornerback, Deron Bland still out. I know that's a big topic amongst Cowboys fans of, kind of why has Bland not been able to return. I know we talked about it recently on multiple shows, but again, it's suffered a setback there with that foot issue, and because of that, he just hasn't felt like he's been able to ready to return and do the things he needs to do to get back on the field with the issues he's still dealing with that foot. And obviously, as the season, if it continues to trend in the direction it's going right now, then it starts getting to a spot where you're kind of wondering, well, why would he even come back this season? And so I think that's got to be something that eventually is going to be considered. But right now, when we're out at practice, Wednesday, Thursday, we have seen Deron Bland out there. He's just not practicing with the team. He's working off the side on the resistance cords. Cooper Rush, another player that's been on the injury list. He's been full this week, but he suffered a little bit of a neck issue on that fumbled snap early in the game. He was able to play through it, but he has on the injury report, so that is of note. Rush is the starter Monday night. I expect him to get the bulk of, if not all of, the snaps at quarterback. There could be some packages again for Trey Lance, but the plan going in is for Cooper Rush to be the starter and play the whole game. Tyler Smith, their starting left guard, dealing with a little bit of a knee issue. We saw him, I think it was on Wednesday. Yeah, he came out and didn't start practicing with the team. He walked off to the side and started working on the resistance cords, and his left knee was pretty heavily bandaged up, and so he's been dealing with something there. Limited, so I wouldn't be surprised if he goes Monday night, but that one kind of seems up in the air for who has been your best offensive lineman this season. A little bit more positive news, I'd say, on the other side of the ball, DeMarvion Overshown, who's been one of the team's best defenders. His knee issue that he suffered in the game last week doesn't appear to be anything serious. He's been a full participant in practice all week, so that's a good sign from DeMarvion Overshown. Speaking of Overshown, so because the week's a little bit different this week, that there's an extra day with Monday night, we had a conference call with a player on Friday, and that was with DeMarvion Overshown. And I think the most notable thing he gave was when he was asked specifically about playing the Houston Texans and kind of a rivalry between the Cowboys and Texans. And he said that when it's the Battle of Texas, especially with them having the season that they're having, obviously the Titans are playing well, a team that they're thinking that they can run the state. And even though he said that it's a down year for the Cowboys, we still run the state of Texas. So we got to go out there with that pride and that mindset of this is still our state and we're still the big brothers. So I thought that was interesting because the big brother, little brother thing makes me think of college football, and obviously a ton of great rivalries in college football. Not to say there aren't great rivalries in the NFL. I just don't know how great of a rivalry the Texans and Cowboys are. In my time covering the Cowboys, I've never really felt like there was one, but interesting quote from DeMarvion Overshown made me feel like it was kind of a college football rivalry with the words he said there. I thought this was kind of an interesting story this week, and a lot of others felt that way as well, judging by the tweets and how it even got some national attention. But if you've watched the Cowboys the last couple of weeks, it's pretty well known that Rico Dowdle has kind of moved into that number one role. Mike McCarthy made it official this week at his press conference saying that Rico is the lead back. it's not like the running game has been great. The Raiders are the only team in the NFL with a worse running game, but it's pretty much the admitting that the committee approach just wasn't working. And so they're trying their best possible way to get the running game going, and that's with Rico Dowdle. And you go back to training camp, he's had the most juice out of that group, and that totally makes sense why he would be the lead guy. Give him the opportunity for the rest of the season to be that number one back, see what you have in him, as long as he can stay healthy. And then that allows you to assess things in the offseason. I still think, regardless, running back is going to be a major position that has to be addressed in the offseason. But Rico will get the chance, it seems like, to get the bulk of the carries the rest of the way. And Mike McCarthy said Friday morning on 105.3 The Fan that he does think that Rico's the type of back that could carry it 20, 25 or more times in a game. We haven't really seen that from him. Injuries have obviously been a big factor in his lack of playing since he was signed as an undrafted rookie free agent in 2020, but he's going to have the opportunity now, so we'll see if that is anything that helps the running game at all. A couple other ones here just to wrap things up. Jerry Jones was asked on 105.3 The Fan Friday morning just about Jason Witten. He's coaching high school football in Dallas, and obviously he's close with the Jones family, so Jerry Jones was asked if he could one day see Witten as an NFL coach. And he said, Jerry responded, yes, without hesitation, yes. He is something that you can't draw up. He reminds me a lot of the other tight end who is a head coach up there in Detroit right now, which is Dan Campbell. And so people are going to take that and they're going to draw that as a comparison of, well, Dan Campbell is obviously having a ton of success up in Detroit. Why wouldn't the similar thing able to happen with Jason Witten with the Cowboys? I wouldn't bet on that if there is a coaching change in the next few months. I just think that Jerry's going to want somebody that has some coaching experience in the NFL, and that obviously Jason Witten doesn't have that. So it's the one difference, too, between Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell was in the league for quite a bit as an assistant coach, and so it's not quite apples to apples there, but now these were former Cowboys tight ends. A lot of people thought when they were players that they would eventually be coaches one day, so I get where some of those comparisons can be made and things like that, but that's kind of where it stops as of right now. But with Dan Campbell's success, I think there's a lot of people that are going to look towards those former players that aren't necessarily an OC or a DC, but they're a guy that is kind of, they change the culture. They're the clear leader, face of the team type deal. And that could be Jason Witten. But like I said, Dan Campbell has had, before he got the Lions job, he was a coaching intern with the Dolphins in 2010. He was the tight ends coach for the Dolphins from 2011 to 2015. He had a brief stint as their interim head coach in 2015 in Miami. And then he was with the Saints from 2016 to 2020 as an assistant head coach and tight ends coach. And that's all before he got the Lions job in 2021. So not exactly the exact same thing as Witten. But yeah, it would not surprise me if one day we see Jason Witten on the Cowboys sideline, whether it's, as assistant coach or if he has a bunch of success, works his way up to being the head coach. I just don't think that would be any time in the really near future. So that was another one. I thought it was probably the thing that stood out the most from Jerry's Friday morning interview, so just wanted to share that. And then the last one I'll wrap up with here is, covering this team right now, going to the facility during the week, it is a little bit more difficult than when they're winning in terms of storylines, because you kind of know when a team is headed in this direction what the answers are going to be to a lot of questions. You're just trying to gather, hey, what's the message of the team right now? How are you guys trying to turn this thing around? You're not getting a lot of different answers, but the one thing that has stood out from Mike McCarthy's message, and he's said it in previous weeks, and obviously it hasn't led to wins, but he's staying with this message of he's really thinking that they can embrace this adversity and possibly use it to turn this season around and kind of have that storybook ending that, let's be honest, most of us don't think is going to happen. But what else are you going to say to the team? But he keeps preaching how this is a great opportunity for them. And he says he tells the guys that all the time to just enjoy this, because this is something you can really learn from and you can use for the rest of your life. And that sounds good, don't get me wrong. And I think that you should go about things that way. I just don't know if, the idea of turning the season around and all of a sudden somehow sneaking into the playoffs late in the year, I don't see that from this team. And so it's going to be interesting over the next month and a half to try and find ways to produce interesting content if the things keep going in this direction. I've said before, I said it last week and I think the week before, and I'll say it again. I think there's maybe 2 more wins left on the schedule for the Cowboys. I would be surprised if there's more than that. But that's just kind of where things are at right now. And it is the Cowboys, so there's always going to be storylines. But it is, when you're writing specifically about the team, and not only are they not winning, but they're losing games pretty handedly, it becomes tough to try and come up with new material to try and share with fans, that fans don't just tune out because they're kind of just sick of it. So that's just kind of the weekly roundup for this one. Again, it's not your typical Sunday. The game will be Monday night against the Houston Texans. So when that game wraps up, we'll have a podcast episode up on Tuesday with our reaction to it as well. So check back for that one. Appreciate everyone listening out there, and we would appreciate it if you share with a friend and tell them about the show as well, and continue listening. We really appreciate your guys' help.
John's weekly recap, it's all the rage. He laughs and he hollers, takes center stage. Win or lose, he's got a grin on his face, 'cause Dallas Cowboys football is his happy place.